So I will go ahead, Claire, and I'll let you introduce yourself. And then if you want to pull up your slides, or if it's easier for you to have me pull them up, let me know and we can get going. As we go, though, I just want to encourage people, if you have questions while Claire's going, feel free to put them in the chat. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask. We want this to be a conversation, and I think that's the best way to get everyone learning. So I'll let Claire take it away now.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. And I just will note, I'm having a weird thing happen with my PowerPoint where I can't get off the presenter mode. So it may actually just be better if you can share them once we get to that. But I'll introduce myself. I'm Claire Alford. I'm on the market development team at Highland Electric. I'll give you the full background on Highland in a few minutes, but I'm based in Washington, D.C. Virginia, right in my backyard. I cover Maryland, Virginia, New York, Georgia, and Texas in my role, and I'm focused on community education. So that means that I do 100% electric school bus education, and I can speak to Highland's model like I'm going to today, and I think it provides a really good illustration of a public-private partnership, which I think is a really appealing thing to school districts right now. But at the end of the day, I just want to educate folks on electric school buses. And I'm sorry that I joined a little bit late. I was on giving another presentation, and it was a tough crowd, so our questions went over. But now I'm revved up and ready to go. So get all of your tough questions in mind, and we'll have a good Q&A. And like Sarah said, obviously this can be really interactive. So if anybody has a question in the middle of the presentation, I don't mind pausing and answering it then, or we can wait until the end. Really, this can just be a discussion. Okay, thanks for pulling those up, Sarah. I appreciate it. Oh, and I should say, before I get started on my background, so I have been at Highland since December in this role, but before that, for those of y'all that are familiar, I was at Advanced Energy Economy, or AEE, the national business nonprofit, and I was doing all transportation electrification policy work, both legislatively and regulatory, so kind of a EV nerd, policy wonk. For better or worse, but it's really great to be at Highland now and just focus on electric school buses. They're really fun. So let's get started. Can we go to the next slide, Sarah? Awesome. Okay, so a little bit of background on Highland. We're a relatively new company, started a little over 3 years ago, and we're based in the North Shore of Boston, up in Beverly, if you're familiar with the area. That's where our headquarters is, and we also just opened a second office in Denver, Colorado. I keep trying to convince them that we need a DC office, but we haven't gotten one quite yet, but we'll see. And we're ever growing. So we're a private company. We're backed by over $250 million in private capital. And a lot of that comes from investors that are interested in the environmental space. And we're, I think, like I like to say, we're kind of pioneering the public-private partnership model for school buses. That it's a model that we've seen a lot in the advanced energy space more broadly, especially with solar. But we're kind of trying to take that and apply it to electric school buses. And we do have some competitors out there that have a similar model. So it's not just Highland that's doing this, which is why while this presentation will be kind of focused on Highland, I think it's applicable more broadly. A few items that I want to note: we have over 330 buses under contract right now. That includes buses in the largest school bus electrification project in the U.S. In Montgomery County, Maryland, which is one of our projects. It's right in our backyard. And I will talk about it towards the end of my presentation. And then we also have the first electric school bus V2G programs, or vehicle to get grid programs, in place, both in Vermont and in Massachusetts. So we can do the next slide. So this slide, sometimes I present it fully and sometimes I don't, depending on the audience. I am pretty sure that all of you will know the many benefits that electric school buses can provide. A few that I like to point out, I think, like the community health benefits, environmental justice benefits, climate, student health. I think all of that's pretty obvious, right? We all know that heavy duty vehicles are some of the heaviest polluters. School buses are out running routes every single day. And a lot of low income school districts are using pretty old diesel buses. I think I was talking to someone from the Louisiana Clean Fuels Coalition this morning, and he was telling me that the school buses in Louisiana can operate legally for up to 20 years, but in some of the lowest income districts, they're beyond even the 20 years. So they're operating, some of them are operating school buses from the early 1990s, which is pretty crazy. But some of the ones that I like to point out and I try to talk about a lot, and I hope will be talked about more, are the resiliency piece. I think it's really important. A bus is a big rolling battery, and provides a lot of benefits both in cold weather and in warm weather with peak shaving, and then also in natural disasters and in hurricanes. It can be used as emergency backup. The options are really endless, and currently they're not. V2G is not allowed in every state or every energy market, but I think it's definitely something that a lot of folks are talking about. So I'm hoping that we can see more V2G activity in the years to come. And then also school budgets. Schools are operating on tight budgets. If a school district is slashing their budget, a lot of times the transportation director or the transportation department is one of the first ones to get a budget cut. And I think the headline for electric school buses a lot of times is that they're 3 times the cost of a diesel bus, which is true. That delta is really big, but over time they will inevitably save a school district money. So I think it's important to talk about them from the economic angle as well. We can go to the next slide, Sarah. Okay, so all these benefits that I talked on, or I just talked about, and you just saw on that slide. So why not go electric? It seems pretty obvious that folks will want to do it. Our CEO, Duncan McIntyre, started Highland with this question in mind. He looked at all these benefits and he was like, okay, well, the technology is there. It's been tested for longer than it may seem. I know electric school buses seem like very very new and cool and hip, and they are. But the biggest manufacturers of school buses that you see on the road today, I see Thomas Bluebird, they all have at least one electric school bus offering, and they've been on the road for quite some time. And so they're pretty tested. The technology is there, all the benefits are there. Why not go electric? Let me go to the next slide. And that's because of all these things that you see here. When you go to a transportation director and you tell them that for 3 times the cost of a diesel bus, we're going to electrify your fleet, we're going to tear up your depot, we're going to install charging stations, you're going to have to figure out when to have those buses on the charger, the list goes on. Surprisingly, people aren't too interested. And you see that here, right? It's buses, it's chargers, it's training, maintenance costs, charge management. So that's where a service like Highland comes in, and we can go to the next slide, a Highland subscription. So we offer, we like to say that we're helping school districts electrify their school bus fleet, and we're kind of taking care of all of these different pieces that come along with school bus electrification that can be really overwhelming to a school district and outweigh all of those benefits that we just talked about. And we're providing them an annual subscription price, much like you'd pay for your Hulu or Netflix, and that's paid annually over the lifetime of the contract that we have with the school district. And those contracts depend on, what the school district wants to do and state law, but usually those are somewhere between 10 and 15 years. So we can go to the next slide. So a Highland subscription includes a whole bunch of things, which I'll go over in detail. But I think what's important is that, and my favorite part is that it's your drivers, your mechanics, your depot. So like I said, I'll go over it, but we're trying to displace and disrupt as little as possible with our model. We're trying to just kind of take the tough parts out of electrification and let a school district just kind of realize all the benefits, and bring everybody along as we do that. So we can go to the next slide. And then we hit it again. Awesome. So what do we provide for that subscription price? You'll see it right here. This is kind of our bread and butter offering. As we grow, we've been able to kind of separate out what we're able to provide, and we can offer kind of bits and pieces of our main offering. But this is really what we were started to do. So the first step is planning. So we design and implement the entire project. I got a question on the last presentation that I just gave, why implement? Because it seems like after step 1 and step 2 is when you need to do RFP and school board approval. So how are you implementing in step 1? Which it kind of made me stop and think, and I was like, maybe you're right. But he brought up a good point, which and I think it's more of we want to make sure that a project is feasible in this first step. So we essentially are designing and implementing out to a certain step to make sure that we want to move forward with the rest of these steps. Because if it's not feasible for us and it's not feasible for the district, we don't want to waste everyone's time going much further. So this first step is very thorough. It involves us going out to the depot, walking the depot, looking where the power lines are, where we need to put charging infrastructure, having initial conversation with the utility, which is very, very important. So it involves all of that, and also talking with the school district about, at what level and at what rate they want to electrify their fleet. And we also look at their current fleet and see what the turnover process is. So the first step is pretty intensive and pretty thorough, but for a reason. So then we go to step 2. Awesome. So we create that subscription plan that I mentioned, and this includes the buses, the chargers, and the depot improvements. So the way that we ensure, and we always ensure that annual subscription price is either cost neutral compared to what the school district is paying for diesel or offers cost savings. The way that we ensure that is by stacking a bunch of different value streams. So I like to picture it as just kind of like a stacked graph. Some of the obvious ones are fuel savings and maintenance savings. One of them is volume pricing. We're the largest purchaser of electric school buses in the US, so we can purchase at a bulk volume. Like if you're going to Costco or Sam's Club, we can purchase at a bulk volume that school districts, a lot of times when they're going to market annually, they're not purchasing a large amount of vehicles, so we can pass those savings back on to them. If there's any vehicle to grid revenue that's available, and this again, it depends on utility, territory, and state, we can help them participate in that. And then I think the most relevant right now is if there's any state or local or federal rebate or grant money available, we can help a school district apply or apply on behalf. It kind of depends on the fine writing. But we can help them apply and maintain compliance with any sort of rebate or grant, and we can pass that back on to them. And I get this question a lot, and I got it last time, which is like, this all sounds too good to be true for have these 6 steps at a cost that's cost neutral or offers cost savings. And I think the simple answer of it's how do we make our money? How do we do it? Is that we kind of bank on the efficiency of the bus. So the school district's paying this annual subscription price to us, and then we bank on it being more fuel efficient, having less maintenance costs, and just being overall more efficient than a diesel vehicle. So we can go to number 3. Then we get to the 2 fun steps, building and training. So building, we procure the school buses and the charging infrastructure, and we help manage the construction of the depot upgrades. This is a step that is most heavily involved with the local utility. It is insanely important that school districts are communicative with their utility even way before they start step 1. It should be like step, I don't even know what the right phrasing is, but it's really important that a school district is communicating with their utility so that when we get to step 3, all of this goes smoothly, and we kind of help navigate that process. And then step 4, which is my favorite, is that we train the maintenance workers, the school bus drivers, anybody that's on site with these buses. We train them. This is my favorite part because I think that it's pretty obvious that school buses are going electric. And so I think that by training the maintenance workers and the school bus drivers, we're giving them a really transferable skill that, they will obviously be able to use at their current school district, but as they grow in their in their career, they will hopefully be able to use in other places as well. So once we train everybody, we get the buses out on the road, taking kids to and from school. We move into this kind of this state where we're just monitoring everything. So that involves charging and maintaining. So with charging, we ensure that the buses are charged every day. So we have a proprietary software that we can use where we can see how charged the buses are, where they are, when they need to be charged again, and we can kind of help the school district maintain full charge on them, or at least the amount of charge that's needed for certain routes. And then 6, maintain. So if anything happens with the charger or the battery, or whatever it may be, we cover that cost for the lifetime of our partnership with that school district. So we can go to the next slide. I think it's really important to mention that we can do projects of all sizes, because I think a lot of times when a school district hears about a model that's either Highland or someone like Highland, their assumption is that it can only happen for school districts of a certain size. But you'll see here, this is just a handful of the projects that we have. And you'll see the really big yellow dot is Montgomery County, Maryland, which is the one that I mentioned. They have over 1,500 vehicles in their fleet. We're helping them electrify them over the next 12 years. Over the next 4 years, we're helping them electrify that 326 number that you see there. On the opposite end, we have Beverly, Massachusetts, which is a fleet of 30 vehicles. They came to us wanting to do a pilot project with 2 electric school buses, and they loved it so much that now we're helping them electrify their full 30. But obviously there's a big gap between a fleet of 30 and a fleet of 1,500. So I think it's a pretty good illustration of the fact that we can work with school districts big and small. Go to the next slide. So I like to highlight Beverly, and I like to highlight Montgomery County just for this reason. They both have really cool aspects to them. I'm actually going to, if we can go to the next slide, there's a really cool video that we have in Beverly. I don't always show it, but I figured it might be fun for us to watch this. It's like, I don't know, the first time I saw it, I was like almost brought to tears, and that's how much of a EV nerd I am. So.
Here in Beverly, I find that the communities are really tight-knit. This is where the U.S. Navy was born. That hits home a little bit too, because my dad's a former Navy man, served in 2 wars. It's a very family-oriented kind of town. The job of a transportation director ultimately is getting the kids to and from school and to and from their programs that they go to. That's a big responsibility. Currently, we have 1 electric bus in our fleet, and our goal is to eventually have the entire fleet be all electric. First thing that people notice when they look at the bus is the fact that there's no tailpipe, so the kids aren't breathing those fumes. Our maintenance costs have dropped significantly. There's a lot less moving parts, so there's a lot less that can break down. It has a very smooth ride. Some of our elementary kids that ride it, they call it the magic bus. Working with Highland has been a very smooth transition. They coordinated everything, whether it was working with National Grid to put the transformers in, running the lines to put the charging systems in. They were our financier. They were the ones who were able to make it affordable compared to a diesel bus. Building the electric fleet has certainly changed some of the things that we do, but ultimately, the job and the goal is still the same. It's to get the kids to school safely, get them home safely. For us, going electric just made sense. We're safer, we're cleaner, and we're running more cost-effective than we were before.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. I'll give you a second to get the...
There we go.
Awesome. So I won't spend too much time on this because obviously we just saw it. But the thing I do want to highlight is if we can move forward to the next slide. Beverly has Thomas Julie's, and the charging stations that we installed are bi-directional, which means that they're able to do vehicle to grid. And if we can go to the next slide. So first off, we future-proofed this depot by installing 24 buses. So obviously you heard in the video, they had one at that time, they have 2 now, they'll have up to 30. But we future-proof so that we have to tear up the physical concrete as little as possible. And then because they're enabled with that bi-directional flow, we were able to work with them and National Grid to participate in National Grid's V2G program, I think last summer, the summer before this summer. And they were able to earn between like $8,000 and $9,000 back in revenue, I think, and that's something that we help them navigate and can be as hands-on or as hands-off as the school district would prefer. We can go to the next slide. So this is Montgomery County, Maryland. Again, this is the largest fleet electrification project in the U.S. right now. You can go to the next slide. On the left, you'll see this is so they have 5 depots. On the left, you'll see a picture of the Bethesda depot. It is electrified, and as of the end of this past school year, they were taking kids out on buses on their regular routes, which is really cool. It's really exciting to go and look at it and stand at the end of that row of charging infrastructure and see all the buses plugged in. It's super awesome. We broke ground on 3 more of their depots this summer. They will be ready by the fall, and then we'll just have 1 depot left, which is their Shady Grove depot. For those of y'all familiar with the DC metro system, it's just literally right at the end of the red line. So like I said, we're working with them over 4 years to deploy 326 buses, and then over 12 years to electrify their full fleet. So we can go to the next slide. I think that's my last slide. So here is my cell phone number and my email. I'm always happy to answer questions, and you can just shoot me an email. I did want to touch on one thing. I don't have a slide in here for it, but I wanted to touch on the EPA Clean School Bus Program, because I know that's top of mind for everybody. We're coming up on the deadline for this first round of funding, which is August 19th. I'm sure everyone on this call knows, but obviously this is the program, the 5-year program that was funded out of the infrastructure bill at the federal level. This is the first round of funding out of a lot more funding. And this is a weighted lottery style round with priority given to low income or rural districts. And I will drop the link. I have the list of priority districts handy, so I'll drop that link in there if you guys want to look and see. It's sorted pretty clearly based on state. But anyway, so we're coming up on the deadline. It's August 19th. Alternative fuel vehicles are eligible, so that includes propane, but a priority district that applies for electric school buses can get the most amount of money available. And each school district can apply once, and they can apply for up to 25 vehicles. I am encouraging in all the conversations I have for every school district to apply, whether they're a priority district or not, because I think it's really important that we oversubscribe this first round, because I think that just sends a really great signal to the EPA and lets them know how much interest there is in the program. But I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has on that, because I know it can get pretty detailed, but I just wanted to touch on that since I know it's kind of top of mind right now. But with that, I will pause, or end, I should say, and we can answer questions. And I wish I was going to make myself some sort of like yellow school bus drink. All I could think of was lemonade though. And then I didn't even have time because I was on another presentation. So I just have water, but I think now we can get to the fun part.
Yeah, and we can go ahead and hop in. I see that, Dave, you have your hand raised and unmuted, so I'll let you go first.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Claire, good to see you again.
Yes, hi, Dave.
In case you're wondering, I got to see Claire like when she did like her first presentation, I think, after having gotten to Highland.
Yep.
I'm wondering, what kind of response are you hearing from school districts when you talk about V2G? Are they comfortable with the idea of giving up control in order to get that payment? Or Are you working with any also on B2B at this point, and what that might be worth to them?
Yeah, so we're not on the B2B. I think that's another great conversation that we can have. On the B2G, I think first and foremost, there's an educational barrier. I think it's kind of a scary concept. But when you sit down with a school district or a transportation director and tell them, and then especially coming from Highland's perspective, where we'll take care of a lot of it, and can be as hands-on or as hands-off as we can, they're generally pretty comfortable with it. I think the recognized savings from it is a pretty powerful, is pretty powerful. And then having that anecdotal story of Beverly and how we helped them participate and how much money they got, I think is really great. I think one important thing to note, and something that we would tell a school district up front, is obviously this likely is not happening during the school year. This is happening during the summer. Then you tell them that and they'll say, well, we use some of our buses during the summer. And that's totally true. They do for a lot of summer activities, but chances are they're not running as many routes during the summer. And so there is more flexibility with the battery and with the buses sitting in the depot. So I think there's definitely some apprehension there, but you know, where it's readily available and where we can kind of point to the clear savings that they're going to get, it doesn't take much to get a school district on board.
Is MoCo going to do that too?
So I don't think that, and anybody correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that there is currently a V2G program in Pepco, but I could be incorrect. But if there is, then I don't think they're participating in it now. But all of those chargers, like I mentioned in Beverly, same in Montgomery County, they're all future proofed, they're all over installed, and they're all bidirectionally capable. And if they're not bidirectionally capable now, they're kind of that in-between charger that's available, where they may not be bidirectional now, but it just takes a really quick, simple upgrade to make them bidirectional. So that possibility is always there with all of our school buses, whether we're installing this charging infrastructure in a state that allows that or not, or a utility territory that allows it or not.
Okay, but it means the contract that you have with them, the subscription that you have with Montgomery County doesn't include a value
Correct.
For that. Okay, yes. Thanks.
Yeah, and thank you for that question, because it reminded me, I also got a question in the last presentation. Like I said, they were kind of a tough crowd, but our modeling and the way that Highland works, we do not depend on V2G revenue. I think V2G revenue is a kind of a sweetener, but it's just really not widely a thing that happens right now. And so our model does not depend on V2G revenue, but we're able to work with the school district if they want to do that and if they're able to.
Okay, thanks.
Excellent. And Steve, I see your hand up, so go for it.
Thanks. Claire, good to see you again.
Hi, Steve.
It's been a few weeks. Always glad to talk about Montgomery County, since I'm a Montgomery County product. So the Montgomery County is a 5-depot setup, and I assume for the most part all the buses are at the depots, yes?
Yes.
Okay, so two of the jurisdictions up here in Northern Virginia are, roughly equivalent in size to Montgomery County, but one of them, well, actually both of them, I don't know the extent, but one of them certainly, a lot of the buses are actually kept at the schools due to lack of facilities. So are any of your projects kind of like combination deployments where you do the depot, but you also put in charges at the schools? And then I guess the follow on is, even in Montgomery County, are you guys putting in any charges at the schools should a bus need to top off or, wait there for something?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I don't think that any of our current projects have a situation where there's not at least some sort of defined depot or some sort of space within the parking lot where the buses consistently park. I think that because we're kind of, we've got a startup culture and we're pretty new, which I think works to our benefit and the school district's benefit, and that we can be kind of flexible. So, we've seen, I've seen just in my time talking with school districts, I've seen cases like that. And I've also seen cases, I know, like in the Eastern Shore and Montgomery, I was talking to some school districts where their bus drivers park their buses at home, which is obviously a something to take into consideration. So, you know, to date, I don't think that we've worked with anything like that, but I think that it warrants some sort of some thinking on it as a group, and then from Highland's perspective as well, because our big thing is trying to be as flexible as possible, because the least amount that we can disrupt a school district's current way that they do things, the better, and the less pushback that we'll get from everybody. So it's kind of our mantra. So it's definitely something that we would be willing to work through. You also make a good point with like the idea of having a charging station at a school to top off. I think currently the projects that we work with, the depots are like within close enough range to the schools that like that's just not something that's necessarily needed. But I think that could come into play when you have the more rural school districts, right? Like the depot is not always in close proximity to the school district or to the school itself. So, you know, it's an interesting thing to consider, but I will say we've got a wonderful technical engineering team that I am not on for many reasons, probably wouldn't be allowed to be on. They're hard at work whenever we partner with the school district at coming up with creative ways to electrify a school district. So I think those are all really interesting points, Steve.
Thanks.
Excellent. Cassandra, I see your hand up.
It is, Alan asked a good follow-up in the chat though that you might want to address real quick, because mine does not follow this topic flow.
That's great. I needed to scroll down. So I'll go ahead and read this out since we are recording this, and I'll put it up on YouTube later for the people who can't read the chat then. So Alan asks, can we spell out and explain the acronyms for a second? V2B, V2G, and then he asked, did someone say B2B? So if you could just sort of give a little bit of a description about those.
Sure. Yeah, so I can start off with B2B and V2G, and then Dave, I think you had mentioned B2B, correct?
Actually, I only mentioned V2B, not B2B.
B2B, okay, perfect.
But for those who wonder, those who've seen it and wonder what it is, B2B is business to business, but that's not what I was saying. I was saying V2B. Yeah, we got some business to business marketing, but I was going to pass it over to you because I was like, I don't know about B2B. V2B is vehicle to building. So that would be if the school district is using the battery on their bus to power the actual school or some portion of it. So that would be, instead of sending the stored energy back to the grid for compensation, they're using it to power the school district and reduce their electricity costs. This is a lot like if you think about like a school that has solar, like a solar array. I was talking to a school the other day that has a solar array that's offsets 100% of the school's electricity costs. So it'd be something like that, right? Where the battery storage in the vehicle is being used to power the building. And the vehicle to grid is when the power that's in the battery or that's stored in the battery is being sent back to the energy or the electric grid that the depot is located in. And in that case, that's not allowed in all power grid territories, but where it is, that energy can be sent back, and the school district generally is compensated on a per kilowatt hour amount of money, or I think in some cases it's a set amount of money. And then while I'm talking about it, yes, Linda, so I can't speak to the Vermont project as much because that's kind of a relatively new one and I need to get up to speed on it. But like I had mentioned in my presentation, we worked with Beverly, Massachusetts. They have the bidirectional chargers. National Grid has a vehicle to grid program in place. National Grid is their local utility. Beverly, Massachusetts is within the National Grid territory. So it's just like all utility programs, we helped Beverly sign up for the program. And then they are able to participate because they have both the electric buses and the bidirectional charger. You have to have a bidirectional charger so that you can send that power back to the grid. A non-bidirectional charger will just take power from the grid to the bus.
this allows it to be sent back. And like I said, this is something that usually takes place in the summer because the buses are sitting idle for longer periods of time. During the school year, chances are the electricity that the battery is or the bus is storing in its battery is going to be used to drive around on routes. But in the summer, when they're sitting idle, any of that excess storage that they're not using can be sent back to the grid.
Awesome. I saw that a couple of people raised their hands during that. I want to come back to Cassandra, but I just want to make sure that Steve or David or Robin, if you guys have questions relevant to this conversation, to go ahead and keep that moving.
This is Robin, and I think I beat you, Dave. I think I started this because I was trying to find out what was being said. Was it B2B, V2B, anyway, so thank you all for explaining that. But that raises another question, which may be related. And I wonder if the technology or the habit is that people, with all this heat are using the power in the batteries to drive around and fuel other vehicles that might have gotten too close to the edge, or buses to go and support the need for rolling blackouts. I don't know. My question is the technology used in that way in any place? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question, Robin. And I think I mentioned this at the beginning. That speaks to the resiliency piece of electric school buses. The idea of them being used as kind of a rolling stock of really big batteries. So that in the wonky world is called a distributed energy resource. And there are a lot of different types of distributed energy resources. Electric vehicles are one of those. Obviously, electric school buses with their big batteries. So distributed energy resources, or DERs, as I like to call them. I don't know if that's the proper term, but DERs can be used for peak shaving instances when there is extreme heat. I know, like in my native Texas, it gets pretty hot in the summer. And ERCOT consistently has to do rolling blackouts and pull back on the energy that they're using, or the energy that I should say that the residents are using because of that. So in that sort of instance, this is all hypothetical, but a school bus could, during the hot summer, send back energy and do peak shaving. So that's making those peaks where people are, blasting their AC, because we love to do that in Texas. That makes it a little less consequential to the grid because we're sending that energy back. I also saw instances, and this is not electric school buses generally, but electric vehicles, of people during the winter storm in Texas a few years ago using their electric vehicle to power parts of their homes, or just simply to sit in for heat. Right. So I think it's like they're my favorite type of distributed energy resource because, like, unlike the other ones, they're, I think, the most tangible, and they make the most sense to everybody. And it's really easy for folks to understand. But like I said, Robin, like the resiliency piece of an electric vehicle generally is one of my favorite things. And I always encourage people to talk more about that because I think it's really valuable.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you. All right, we'll go to Cassandra next, and then Steve, and then I have a question from Robert in the chat, and then we'll go to Dave.
Hi, Claire. I was hoping, so one of the school districts we talked to recently had a big concern about the maintenance of the buses. Like, if they were to get an electric bus, they're in a very remote location. If something were to go wrong with it, they can't have it out of commission for several weeks while they wait for somebody to come out and fix it. So I was wondering what your maintenance network looked like, because in the service plan you were talking about, you mentioned reimbursing repair costs and labor and parts, but not that you all will come out and provide that maintenance network.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think there's a few different parts to the Highland model that are meant to address that. So obviously we reimburse maintenance costs, which is important from a budgetary standpoint. But also, like I had mentioned, when we're after we procure the buses and we have the buses at the depot and the charging infrastructure at the depot, we work to train the maintenance workers and the bus drivers to be able to work on these vehicles as well as they were on the diesel buses. So we're enabling them with the tools that they need for, you know, whatever it may be, minor or more major maintenance issues. If it goes beyond that, if they're in partnership with Highland, we have my coworker Sean he lives up in Boston, but I think he is out. He's out at Montgomery County, I would say at least 3 or 4 times a month, not because anything's going wrong, but just because he wants to be out there working with the maintenance workers, working with the school bus drivers, you know, hearing from them, hearing what they like, what they don't like. So we're out there all the time. So I like to say that we don't displace any jobs, but if anything, we add, you know, some resources to the school district. I know in one case, there was a charger that was broken down. I think that it was at Beverly, and our CEO Duncan called Thomas, or I guess we called Thomas, and I think it was Thomas, and they said, you know, it's going to be a slow turnaround. And he, the very next day, I was out on a plane flying there and was like, can you just give me the charger? So we've got at Highland, it's a big group of like stubborn people, I think, and also people that want to help. So I think you get the added bonus of having our folks on your team, but then you also get the security of knowing that your own maintenance workers and bus drivers are trained on this technology.
Okay. Yeah, I know you mentioned the Montgomery County project was kind of right in y'all's backyard. So it's a little bit easier to be on site when you don't have to drive 4 or 5 hours to get out to the remote location to deal with that type of thing.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, you know, that's just one of the things I think I mentioned, like in rural counties, it may be more difficult if a depot is located not as close to a school. So I think in rural district, there's a lot more consideration for those types of things. But I think, you know, in addition to Montgomery County, that's the one that I'm out at most, but we've got folks out in Colorado at some of our projects. In Vermont, we've got a pretty rural project in Vermont. So, you know, I think the benefit of working with Highland is that in addition to being stubborn, we're also trying to be as flexible as possible. So, you know, but I think it's not to discredit the fact that there are a lot of considerations for more rural school districts.
Okay. And you mentioned your coworker talking to the drivers and the maintenance people. The one school district I also talked in depth about their current electric bus. Is they can't get any of their drivers to drive it. They don't like it. They're older. They prefer their diesel bus and they're not having it. Have you had pushback from the drivers in the Montgomery County case as well?
So I actually it's funny. That's really funny. I was able to be a part of in Montgomery County before the school buses went out on routes. I was able to be a part of the school bus driver training. So I actually sat in the buses and got to run a bunch of routes with a bunch of different school bus drivers there. So in Montgomery County, it's a big enough county where they were able to, if a school bus driver was interested in driving electric, they are able to, and they could come out and they could be trained. The man that I spent the day with, he said that he immediately wanted to drive an electric school bus, and then all of his friends that were also school bus drivers from Montgomery County, if any of them said that they didn't want to or they were apprehensive, he said he was adamantly convincing them otherwise because he loved it so much. He said his kids are calmer whenever they get off the bus, they're calmer on the bus. It's just better experience for him to drive. So I think that's really funny. I think, again, that's just educational barrier too, which is like, you know, I think if we can get the bus drivers on these buses, they may find that they actually prefer them. But I think, you know, maybe they don't. But I think something that is interesting would be thinking through how a school district can incentivize school bus drivers to want to use the electric school buses. I don't know what that incentive looks like, but I think it's definitely something that's worth thinking through, because like you said, and this goes for maintenance workers, for transportation directors, and for school bus drivers, that maybe later on in their career, sometimes they're like, you know, why would I learn to drive something new or maintain something new if I don't have to. So we're oftentimes are met with some apprehension, but usually it doesn't come from the school bus drivers.
I'll also just jump in here and say that from my experience working with another rural county, Louisa County here in Virginia, they got a couple of electric school buses and they had a little bit of pushback, but what they decided to do was take those first 2 buses and find people who were really excited about it so that they could share with the rest of their team. And it seemed to work well for Louisa, but also, as Dave mentioned in the chat, in some places, a lot of people are just excited for that new technology, but not everyone's a new technology adopter. So finding advocates is always useful. And I will hand it over to Steve, since we're getting close on time.
Thanks, Claire.
Mm-hmm.
Real quick, are you guys doing any microgrids in Montgomery County?
No, we're approached about it quite a bit though, because I think it's a really interesting proposition. But the short answer is no, not now. But I think in Montgomery County and also in other places, the idea of like a fully smart school with a microgrid and some solar and some electric school buses would be really interesting.
So I guess a follow-on, are you doing microgrid anywhere? And then the follow-on is, if so, using the school or the depot area as an emergency center.
Yeah, we aren't right now, but it would be, I think that's another thing that makes doing microgrids interesting, is coming from that resiliency piece. I know like in Texas, again, like during hurricane season, you can use a microgrid to power a hospital or, an emergency shelter place. And I think a depot would be a good, or a school would be a good use case for that, but not currently.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Excellent. And I said that we would go to Robert's question next. He asked if anyone knew about any vocational departments at high schools coming up with some type of curriculum to get these students engaged. I will note that Alan did respond that this would be something that Virginia Clean Cities might be interested in collaborating with if anyone has ideas, but I don't know if Claire or anyone else on the call is aware of any kind of educational efforts like this.
So I don't know about electric school buses specifically, but I know the union electric workers, IEBW, they have a program in place to train workers. I think that's more on the installation of charging infrastructure, but I know that that's a pretty well thought out one. And this is just something interesting that I saw at a conference. I went to a conference in Chicago a couple of months ago, and the man who leads up the local chapter of like firefighters in Chicago was talking about how they're offering training for firefighters to help know how to handle electric vehicle crashes. So not anything bad against electric vehicles, but just in general, as we get more electric vehicles on the road, you approach them differently than you would a conventional vehicle. So I think it's interesting to think about all the different parts and the different types of training and different areas that we need for this change.
Awesome. And then I will hand it to Dave, but real fast, I'm going to put a couple of links in the chat. I'm going to first put Virginia Clean Cities summary page of the EPA program for people to be able to reference. I know a lot of people here aren't specifically with school districts, but we encourage everyone to advocate for your local school boards, your superintendents, reach out to people that you know, because as Claire said, we want this to be oversubscribed because that'll bring us more funding and more support for these programs. I'm also going to put in the chat links to both mine and Claire's contact information, just so you can copy and paste them real easily if you have questions. And the last thing is that we will be having the Tech Happy Hour next month, talking about the James Madison University procurement contract that we currently have going. We'll be talking to a couple of the EVSE providers, electric vehicle service equipment providers on there. So if people are interested, we'll encourage you to register. And then Dave, if you still have your question, take it away.
I got it real fast, but I'm also going to respond to one of the earlier ones, which is we've actually done a solar storage microgrid to EV charging equipment for transit buses on Martha's Vineyard. And that was actually set up originally as a resilience project because they get power outages all the time on the island. Anyway, my question was, Claire, I mean, are you starting to feel like you have an idea of what the maintenance cost savings are yet, or is it too early to tell? I mean, because you guys sort of build that into your subscription model too, right? So the question is, everybody's always asking us, it's like, okay, so what do our maintenance costs tend to look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think ours is, I don't want to say educated guess, but educated guess based on a bunch of different factors that we've seen. I think that and Tim Shannon is it's like a kind of on the Highland team as a brand ambassador, but he's the transportation director from the Twin Rivers Unified School District in California, and we often consult with him as far as like historical data goes, right? It's kind of silly to think that or consider like 7, 8, 9-year-old data to be historical, but really in the world of electric school buses, it is. Like that's one of I think he has one of the longest running electric school bus fleets in the US. And so I know that there are citations that we have from him as far as the percentage of cost savings, both on maintenance and then also on fuel. So I'm happy to follow up with you
Okay.
on that, Dave.
And which school district was that?
It's the Twin Rivers Unified
Twin
School
Rivers.
District.
Okay.
Yep. And I can follow up with you on that, and I'll also attach a report that they were featured in from Rocky Mountain Institute. I think it lays out the kind of the cost savings and also compares what they were paying for diesel at the time versus what they're paying per kilowatt hour.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Greatly appreciated.
Excellent. Well, tons of great questions today. Thank you everyone for your great questions, and thank you, Claire, for answering them. As usual, if anyone has follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to Claire and myself. Talk to your school districts. Encourage them to apply for school bus funding because it's a rebate program. You can get most of the bus covered, which is great. And we look forward to seeing you guys hopefully next month. And as usual, I will be posting this video and sharing it around with everyone after the fact. So thank you, everyone. And thank you, Claire.